Hello ladies and gentlemen, Dave Dobbs here. It's Friday 30th of December 2022. So we're very close to the new year. So yeah, many happy returns to the whatever you call it, you know, I mean, happy new year. Hope your Christmas was okay. Hope you kind of like all got through that. It's been a bit of a struggling time, I must admit. The whole thing is just all the news, everything. It feels like we're in this kind of crazy stasis time where everything's just kind of like we're in the eye of the storm. Like it's an oddly kind of quiet time, but there feels like there's lots lurking, especially with all the news what's happening in China at the moment and this massive surge of what they're saying is Omicron, or what seems to be allegedly. I've got Shanti here as well. Say hello, Shanti. Say hello, who's there? Shanti Pants the Wonder Dog. So let's just go. Let's not mess around. Let's just go. Well, I mean, let's not really mess around that much. Ironically, I've got Margaret Thatcher coming down and going on all fours down there. That was in 1982. That was her big meeting in 1982 where she went to meet Deng Xiaoping, I believe. And of course, the last big state visit, well, I can't say the last big state visit, but the first major state visit from the West to... Go on, lie down, sweetheart. Come on, up here. Come on, lie down. Come on. Good girl. Good girl. Yeah, so the you know, I wanted to talk about some visits to China. I want to talk about Nixon's visit in 1972 and Margaret Thatcher's visit in 1982, and how her plans didn't quite go to plan, which might be marked by her collapsing at the base of the steps to the Great Hall in what was called Peking then, Beijing now, but at the time we called it Peking, I think, and that was the Great Hall. She'd gone there to meet Deng Xiaoping, and then Deng Xiaoping didn't speak to her. He went straight over to the microphone and basically said, you know, that he would be delighted, or China would be delighted to take back Hong Kong, and its sovereignty meant everything to China, and that Hong Kong was going back to China. And so began a lot of different ideas of what really happened there, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what happened with Nixon going out to China in 1972 and the deal that was done in 1972, and which we don't know a lot about. We just have to kind of piece these things together, and but I'm going to talk about a few things, and I'm going to really hopefully change your perspective to some of the things that are happening in China right now, and look at it from a slightly different perspective. We're also going to talk about this shot here. Mr. MBB 333 posted it on. When did he post it? He posted it on the 27th of December, so 2-3 days ago. And they look like they're tumbling. He mentions them tumbling several times in the video. There's a whole sea of them. He counts around about 19 of them. They did seem to be below the plane, but it does look like he, like I say, 3 times I seem to remember in the video, he mentions the word tumbling. And they do look like they're kind of big rocks, kind of flying through the air at the same pretty much speed as the airplane, maybe slightly faster. And this odd look, there's a whole load of them. I'll let you play the video. You can see the title of the video there, but I don't know if there's a better shot there. Yeah, there's a better shot of them, and that's the kind of like Yeah, that's the kind of brief, kind of like I won't play any more than that because it's I'm going to go beyond. I think you can play up to 5 minutes of someone's footage without their permission. But I really want to draw you into his into this because it does look like they are there just below the plane. Is that feasibly possible? The only reason it stood out in my mind was that about a week ago, when just before I made the last video or just after, I'd had a dream about asteroids and I'd looked up and these rocks were flying by and they were so heavy that they were going over the top of my head and they were just moving. They weren't falling to earth. They were just kind of going over the top of my head, moving across. I don't know what that meant. It was almost like I felt like in the dream it was just like it was saying, I saw them over the head and I panicked, and then as this rock came down closer and closer to the earth, I was moving around it, realising that I could navigate round these. That's what I felt like the dream was telling me, that there's a lot coming but you can navigate round it, and so it was a very odd kind of like, it was a very odd dream. Started off scary and then realising that I could kind of like, I could run underneath this thing. It was moving so slowly and yet it had so much mass that it didn't have the kind of like effect. It was like it wasn't being massively affected by Earth's gravity because it's, you think about something that's got its own speed in space and time, and it comes very close to our Earth, so close to our Earth, and though it seems like it's not moving, it's actually moving, basically 500 miles faster. 500 miles an hour, if he's assuming these are travelling about 500 miles an hour, and they look like they're travelling slightly faster than the aircraft. So the aircraft's probably travelling about, probably cruising somewhere about between 500 and 700 miles an hour. So I'd imagine that they're travelling at potentially a little bit faster. I mean, I really don't know, but potentially a little bit faster than even 500 miles an hour. It depends how fast the plane's going, and obviously neither of us really know, and so it's all up for kind of like speculation and grabs, and there's not, I'm not offering any right or wrong answers. It's just very odd that I should see these things now after saying that I imagine, but I would obviously imagine to see them above us out in space doing that. I wouldn't imagine them seeing down there, so there's likely to be UFOs or something like that, because I can't imagine something except for that odd dream that I had very recently, like I say, seeing these big masses. And I've been talking about how we are let's come the other way. Let's come to where we are in the model 2023, and we see Europa coming in here. This curve one here, not the Chiron, the one that's next to it, and we're imagining that this is cutting. That's the September point. If we were there, if the Earth was there at that point, that would be the classic kind of September point, and that would be the kind of like December, January point. Now, this model was built 3 years ago, and I was assuming that was going to be the case, and this object was dropping back like these ones drop back one calendar month every year. I was assuming that this one was, and it just doesn't seem to. We won't obviously truly know until I'm imagining kind of late, around about the 20th of January, which is a date that's cropped up in as I've explored many times. So I'm imagining that we that when we come back to 2000 this sort of time, that this object here, that Europa has actually come much further around, and it's actually been going maybe not even one calendar month forward, but just slightly further forward each year since its big crossing. We had the big flyby in 2017, the 20th of January, but it was still very small. It was still. I mean, it was massive. It was. I got a shot of that. That was a massive sighting. Do you remember? That was the same time. That was 2000. That was the 2018, 2019. Around about January. and then we had to go back to. That was that shot I was looking for the other day. Look at that, the way we actually saw the shot on the 1st of September 2019. And we saw the whole curve of the shot. And do you remember I was saying how we could see it to the right hand side of the sun, and it was just like, it was clearly, we'd seen it coming in on the 3rd of July 2019, and it was just like, look out for it, we're going to see it coming round. I was thinking it was going to come out in kind of like February, March, which was explaining the kind of February, March kind of flybys that we were getting, and that we are going to obviously get in February, March 2023, because that's when we've got the other ones coming in. But then we saw it in the wrong place, and it was just like, oh my god, that is absolutely insane. It's actually come in here and then it's gone out there, as in what I'm literally like that, like this one coming in here and going out like that, which is why I've done that. And obviously I've got the timings of these slightly wrong, but we also have to understand that, you know, we see, I was going to show you that sighting, wasn't I, the just so we know what we're all talking about. When was it? Just going back to the beginning of September. Oh, there it is, look. Well, there was that one as well. There was the Dill Martin one. He also posted that in January 2017. Epic shot. And then we had that on the 20th of January 2017. And then 2 days later, we had the big earthquake in Papua New Guinea. And, you know, and so we've got all this evidence of these flybys coming in, this aspect of it, you know. But we also have to understand that where we saw in last year, we saw with the long duration volcanoes, and we're understanding that these objects then were coming in on the same ecliptic plane and traveling parallel with us, and then coming back, coming out. All these ones coming round here, coming and running parallel to the ecliptic plane as they come in, and then coming back out here to go back round whence they came, around this object, Pluto, whatever you want to call it. And so we have that kind of February, March position coming in, and this July, August position going out, or this September position coming in. If it doesn't go right around the sun and it's coming in this direction, which it seems to do, it comes in September and goes out in December, January. And you know, so we've got all this unfolding, but you can imagine that when it was coming in from, when this system was above us, and all of its planets were dropping down towards the kind of like our kind of real kind of solar system, and then going back up to it, when they were coming in above, we were seeing them here, or we were seeing them here, coming in or out. You know, we're kind of working on our ideas of proximity based on what we think is kind of further away from us out here, maybe even on the ecliptic out here. But proximity it could have been aligned at that point, but just so far above us, as it's coming in direct, way above us, or at those points coming in way below us. And then during the point of last year, everything came onto the ecliptic plane, and all these systems, this system and our sun, were suddenly all on the same ecliptic plane as they were passing, as our sun was passing, coming through the ecliptic plane of the planet X system, which Pluto, whatever you want to call orbit, and it was coming up and coming out. And so we're on the kind of ascension process of coming through. Our sun is on the ascension process through the planet X system, and we're just coming through, and we can see that because of, like I say, the long duration volcanoes last year. And so we've done that. We're going to see what happens there. We're going to see what unfolds there. But the last time that I'm of a mind that we were on the ecliptic plane in this fashion was obviously during the Second World War, and obviously I've explored this enormously. And if we go back to, let's just go back now to, well, let's use the one without any overlays here actually, because it runs a bit quicker. let's go back to 1944, because I don't know if you saw, but Brandon Corey-Nagley posted a video, and one of his last videos, or maybe penultimate video, I'm not too sure, but he talks about Vesuvius waking up. And I got to be honest with you, I haven't seen any mention on any other network or news to that account. I really tried to track it and trace it, but it went bang on in March, ironically, 1944, and then as we go back to kind of 1939, we start seeing all the Vesuvius eruptions in 1939 were kind of like they were I've even got them written down actually. List of, let's go down to 1939. So we've got, it's talking about the eruptions that went from the massive burst of eruptions that went from 1913 to 1944. Although we do notice that there was a really big eruption in vigorous explosive activity from the summit crater. That was in 1903 to 30th of September 1904. You see that August, September sort of time, 1905, 1906, and then it talks about the kind of like the explosive reactions here that went from 1913 to 1944, 1944 being the last big eruption, and then it's crossed the ecliptic, and then we go into the side that we've seen, where we've seen kind of basically 84 years, the best part of 84 years of, a bit less than that, because obviously the 84-year period is 1939, going back to 1939, and it kind of, we saw a lot of eruptions starting around that sort of time of Vesuvius, and then it went up to 1984 to March 1944, sorry, and then stopped. Had a big final kind of eruption, and of course now we've crossed the ecliptic, because we've seen the longest duration volcano since Galileo last year, two back to back. The Icelandic one that started again February, March, and then kind of went up to about August, and it stopped, and then the next one starts, La Palma starts in around about late August, September, and goes right up through to early December, but it doesn't get to January point. It doesn't get to that January point. So we were running parallel to it, but we were either, it was so much above us at that point, or below us, but I'm of a mind it was way above us at that point in the northern hemisphere. It was so far above us that it wasn't affecting us at that point, and then or that we were so far ahead of it, it was getting closer and closer and closer to us, but we remained constantly ahead of it. And then for this year, for the Kilauea and the Mauna Loa eruptions to start just recently, with the only object we've got, with the one we've charted, this same one, the one I just showed you, is we don't know what's going to happen, but we can see so much of we can see in our history the characteristics of these flybys. If it is these flybys that are causing it, and these incredible sightings, and the fact that we've had just so many utterly unbelievably fantastic shots, implies that there's massive cognitive dissonance going on, and that we just can't go beyond our belief systems, which seem to rule over us at this time. So that's where we are. We don't know really what's going on. We kind of we know that we're at our big kind of like perihelion, Jupiter perihelion point. That's coming up on around about the 20th of Jan. And there seems to be kind of like a big kind of like center of kind of earthquake and volcanic activity that seems to kind of like come in these every 12-year cycles. It's not absolutely precise, but you can see there's a massive kind of like there's a kind of like there's patterns in here. There's patterns in here, and if the twins are coming, if the twins are coming in, the ones that are going to come after this kind of January flyby, the next two that are going to come in, or the next ones that are going to come in, are going to be in the February-March position. Like I say, it's two flybys. As last year, it was two flybys back to back, and it was the it was we saw last year the kind of central sections of both those flybys. This year we're going to these next flybys coming in. We're going to see the front end. No, hang on, let's get that right. We're going to see the back end of the kind of like of this coming flyby, the one where it's going out. It's going out point, right at the point of going out. It looks like it at the moment, and we're going to see the entering in the beginning of the flyby as it coming in the February-March position, not the kind of July August position of it going out. And you can only be one side or the other. It doesn't seem to be. It never seems to affect both sides massively. It seems to be much more focused either on the one that's coming in here and going out is either, like I say, it starts off affecting us in September, and then it seems to slowly move over to this position, to the kind of December-January position. And this one, as they're coming in, they kind of align at this point in the July-August position, and then over a period of 4 years, they slowly drop back, and so it starts off here in 1939, and they're kind of July-August in that position, and then by 1944 they've dropped back to crossing at this point here. And so that's the Vesuvius point, if they're coming in the northern hemisphere. And of course that's what we're seeing here. We've already seen it. Like, again, Mr. MBB 333 shows some amazing shots of the three coming in. If that's what that is, I don't know. It's a pair and one more. And well, no, he showed 5, didn't he? He's just like an absolutely incredibly bizarre shot. So what to make of any of this at the moment is very, very tricky, because we've got so much data going on. But could we expect Vesuvius to go off here? Could we expect big volcanoes to start going off in the northern hemisphere? Well, by absolute logic of what we've seen in previous years, the patterns. Like I say, the whole system has been on the wrong side of this whole system at large has been on the wrong side of the ecliptic plane of our solar system for it to affect Vesuvius. And now, like I say, we've seen the long duration volcanoes last year, so we've seen the kind of the crossing point of the ecliptic, and now we're plunging up and above this whole system. We are the ones who are on the if you like, on the ecliptic coming up through, or an angle coming up through the ecliptic plane of the Planet X system. So anyway, so that's where we are there. I just thought I'd give a summary, because obviously I just don't know what's going to happen now, and no one knows. And maybe I've got this all wrong. I really, I've just done my level best to try and make sense of all this. And now I want to go back to this whole China thing for a little bit. And it seems like such a it might seem far away from reality of what I'm talking about here, but the basis of what I'm talking about here is this notion of what happens when you enter into a free trade deal. And we talk about the NAFTA agreements that were created when Canada signed the free trade deal with America, and now it's bound by these courtroom processes for the corporations so they can supposedly protect their intellectual property. And you have these member state dispute systems that replace the normal kind of the normal systems of law that would have operated in Canada to deal with crimes, specifically crimes carried out by big corporations. they can hide behind these legal barriers, these legal frontiers, where they can, where to protect their intellectual property, they can have these ongoing, very expensive lawsuits going on that don't cost millions, cost literally billions. And these, basically, behind this veil of these big lawsuits, they can just get away with, well, they can get away with murder, literally, and you just can't afford to bring them down. And when I think about election fraud, when I think about election fraud, let me just come out of that. So let's just leave that as a little. That's a good backdrop to have for this discussion, because that's the kind of real picture that we need to be having of the system that we live in, to give it again this idea that it's all moving, and this motion that's given to the whole system through this kind of like this bird-like effect that's put over the top of it, and this being our sun, this being this Pluto-esque planet, and this being planet X, that our sun and this Pluto-esque planet kind of orbit with their respective with their each individual respective moons. When we think about election fraud and what happened in 1968 and Dick Gregory, and how supposedly, officially they claim that, it was, I can't remember who Richard Nixon was running against, but he basically he won the election in 1968, and or so we're told. And Dick Gregory, who was a black comedian, the computer systems that tabulated the result, gave him 9 million votes in Pennsylvania. He was 9 million ahead, something ridiculous like that. And the media got together and decided that that it was no way would the American people vote for a black comedian, and those votes were kind of taken away and given to Richard Nixon, and or something along those lines, allegedly, something like that. It's a bit tricky to say, because you try and find the original articles and they're a bit sketchy, and what computer systems were running and blah blah blah, and how the elections were tabulated. But if that was a bogus election, and we just literally, because they literally publicly said that they took those votes away from him and made the decision that no way would the American people vote for a black comedian. And then he went, and as president, he then removed the gold standard. And when you remove the gold standard, when you take the value away from a currency, and you're forcing everyone, the world, to play your game with your monopoly money that hasn't got any value anymore, other than what you can drive with the purchase power of that money, but without actually having any value behind that currency, other than the products and the value of which you are buying, which is the ultimate theft. If I buy your car or your house off you, but I use the value of your house or your car to generate the money to buy your house or car, it's theft. It's a deception. It's just dreaming money up out of nowhere, which is putting a lot of money in a lot of people's hands, all based on basic credit drawn up by the movement of dollars and whatever fiat-based currency that you're operating in. If it's driven by that kind of fiat-based kind of like speculative, whatever they call it, what do they call it? I can't remember. There was a. Do you remember Zeitgeist? And they came up with that term that was the fundamental kind of backbone. I can't remember the term now, but I think it's not like, maybe it's fractional reserve banking or something like that. But it's basically for every dollar of movement they can print $10 of credit, something along those lines. And it's just like, and so when you're kind of drawing up credit based on the movement of money, it's the ultimate form of theft, because it's complete out of control. You know, you can never run out of money. You just keep playing this game forever, and the numbers just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And you remember in Obama's time when we were approaching the 16 trillion fiscal cliff, and it was just like, we can't go higher than 16 trillion. Why? Well, you can just keep going and going and going, as long as everyone is consenting to this grand deception, this massive vacuum cleaner that is just sucking up all the wealth of the world like a black hole. A credit machine gone absolutely mental. If all the time everyone buys into it, it just kept adding zeros to the notes and just making the denominations bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But and we call it inflation. Everything starts getting out of hand. But basically, there's no value there. There's no residual value there. You can't bury that in your back garden and come down and take it back later like a gold bar or something. So Nixon did that, and then of course he went out and he signed this deal with China. And what's interesting about opening up a trade zone, because Deng Xiaoping, who signed that deal, he was he was exiled by the former premier. Well, he was exiled by Chairman Mao, because Chairman Mao thought he had very right-wing views. But I lived in Hong Kong for a long time, and I studied it quite a bit out there. I was quite fascinated by the whole story, and it seems that the reason why they finally allowed this an area of China to be devoted over to capitalism was so they could fund total communism. Now, I read that years ago. I went up to the university in Hong Kong, one of the universities in Hong Kong, and I was doing all this research for a story that I was writing at the time about gay rights after post the handover, and what the effect would be if China stayed in the hands of if China went back to if Hong Kong went back to Chinese rule after 97. What would be the effect on certain types of religious and all the different kind of effects it was going to have on society, whether there's going to be a massive kickback of what would and wouldn't be allowed any longer, and whether homosexuality would be illegal, whether Christianity would be illegal, whether kind of any form of faith or religious belief would be deemed illegal, what was going to happen. And that's when I discovered about this whole idea of this free trade deal. Not that it was called a free trade deal, it was just this signing up of something, and this whole area, that if you were lived within this enclosed, that was going to be this one country, two systems, this new system that was going to be created after Nixon's visit within China, which was going to be this capitalist zone. And this capitalist zone was going to allow corporations to come and do business in China and set up big corporations in China, which went totally against all the kind of like the ethos behind the Chinese Communist Party, and yet it went ahead, and China's become the biggest kind of manufacturer, exporter of goods. It's a massive capitalist machine. But it's one country, two systems. If you go into that system, you effectively leave China. You leave the Communist Party. You can't go back. If you leave and you become part of the capitalist system, the one country, two systems, if you can become part of this other system, then you are on your own. You're with that. You make your own way. There's no like healthcare. There's no you have to do it all yourself. You have to do it all through the capitalist program, like you do in America. It becomes this kind of capitalist. And so what happens when you create a monster like that in a country that is, is this a very similar thing going on in China that's happened in Canada, that's now happening, Australia has just signed the free trade deal, and obviously now they can be carved up and go through all this whole process now because they've signed this deal, which is another layer of sovereignty that has been removed, and this access to the market in a completely new, uncensored way, where you have rights as a corporation. Oh, excuse me, I'm tired. As a corporation, that the governments can't. When the government interacts with, when the Chinese government interacts with this capitalist zone, say they want to get involved in the property market, then they've got things like Evergrande, which is a massive corporation that the Communist Party has set up to operate in the capitalist zone to generate massive amounts of money. But it's operating within a capitalist zone. If you like, it's not operating within China. It's not that it's working under another level of law and rules that are set out by whoever they did that deal with, which we could see as being potentially Nixon. But was it? What? If that was election fraud on some massive level, I mean, it's not like a conspiracy theory that Dick Gregory got 9 million votes in Pennsylvania and that they were taken from him. The computer systems tabulated the results, and they said that the computer systems couldn't be trusted, and so they just manually took it over, and they said that no way would the American people vote for a black comedian, and blah blah blah, and we had this whole thing. But if that was one election fraud, and then what happened was that the gold standard was then broken, number one, and number two, this deal was done with China, where they opened up this capitalist zone where anything was legal unless you could afford to stand against it. And if you wanted to stand against it, technically, well, we just don't know how this deal was. You look at the ideas of when they were putting out you remember when pre-Brexit everyone was saying, oh, Europe wants to take us into the free trade deals. They want to take us into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or what we were calling here on our side next to the Atlantic was the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. But it was the same type of free trade that Canada deal, the same type of NAFTA agreements with the kind of like with the member state dispute systems, which just, Canada is the most sued nation on the planet as a result of signing those agreements. What the corporations can do is just absolutely beyond comprehension. There's no, it's what I said. I remember making my video in 2019, pre-COVID, and I was sick with COVID, ironically, and I was saying, guys, if we enter into these free trade deals now, we're sold down the line. We've basically surrendered. We've literally surrendered. They've got access to our DNA, to everything. Everything is up for grabs. Everything is up for the capitalist exploitation. So when we hear all this news about China and what's happening and all these labs and everything else like that, we don't really understand what we're dealing with in China. Whether this is really the Chinese Communist Party that's doing this, or whether this is all operating under the umbrella of this agreement that was set up in the days of Nixon, and this trade deal, and this whole capitalist zone that led to the one country, two systems, that has led to, let's go back again now. Let's go back and look at what happened, why Margaret Thatcher turned up in 1982, because, we were getting closer and closer to 97. And actually, let's look at how China did a deal. Britain had a big company called Jardines that was very supposedly, allegedly, involved in the whole, they call it the Golden Triangle, the whole kind of like the bringing in of, basically all the ships were leaving China full of the most, full of trade, things that were being bought around the world. And then these ships were returning back to restock empty. So that China wasn't importing, they were only exporting. And then Jardine supposedly, allegedly, got involved in the whole kind of distribution of opium. And that led to massive opium addiction in China. And that really broke down the workforce. and it made them much more dependent on foreign imports as a result of the drug addiction. And supposedly Jardines was a big part of that whole thing. People say that, talk about Jardines and they say it's it's bad money turned good and blah 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 and all the rest of it. Cathay Pacific, things like that, owned by Jardines. They're a massive, great corporation. Cathay Pacific was owned by Jardines. I don't even know if it's even operating anymore. It might have long since gone. I'm not too sure, but it was an aggressive time. Hong Kong was the deepest harbour in the South China Sea. It was a very strategic maritime kind of like piece on the chessboard. It was and so there was fighting going on between the British and the Chinese, and then suddenly the Chinese just turned around and said, actually, you can have Hong Kong. Lock, stock and barrel. Not on a 99-year lease. They turned around and said, actually, you can have Hong Kong. You can have it all. And Britain was a little bit unsure, but like, okay. And then the Chinese said, and we'll give you, it was like about 10 times more land on top of Hong Kong. They said, and we'll give you a further 10 times more land on a 99-year lease. So Hong Kong's yours forever, but you can have all the new territories as well on a 99-year lease, and for review in 99 years, or as we get closer to 99 years, to see how a relationship is going, and to turn the situation from what was just going on with this ongoing war and aggression to stopping the war. I mean, it was a great thing in one sense because they were going to get 10 times more land potentially, as well as Hong Kong, but the fighting was going to stop, which was going to be a massive drop in the sale of weapons. So it was a kind of like, ooh, and Britain's always been big in weapon sales, and so it was like, how can we do this? So but we could actually properly set up in Hong Kong. It wouldn't just be guns and killing and opium that we're selling. We'd be actually kind of like setting up for real, having proper systems, having proper companies, corporations, and everything else operating in there, and it being a legitimate part of the British Empire, part of the Commonwealth. And then as we got closer and closer to 97, Margaret Thatcher, against all her top aides, kind of like better judgment, she just steamed. She wasn't betting on talking. She was betting on, apparently, allegedly, but apparently on very kind of like on terrible terms with basically everyone in her cabinet. And there's all sorts of horrible stories about what was going on in her cabinet and what the people were that she had massive control over, but she couldn't obviously have that much control, or maybe other people had more control over them than she did. But whatever happened, she went out to meet Deng Xiaoping in 1982 to do some deal, as if to, and the theories were that she went out to do a deal where she was going to continue and take that capitalist zone, do the same deal that Nixon did, and take that capitalist zone where it started just above Hong Kong in what was it called? I can't remember what's just above Hong Kong now. But anyway, Hong Kong. As soon as you go above Hong Kong, basically you enter into the capitalist zone, which goes, and that goes right up to Wuhan, ironically. Oh God, it's on the tip of my tongue then. But it goes right up to Wuhan, everything. The entire kind of like from Wuhan and going right up to the Three Gorges Dam and then all the way down to Shanghai. The entire Yangtze River, every bit. That's the entire trade zone that was created with by the Nixon Ping kind of like Deng Xiaoping meeting in 1972, and after that it's like a whole new China, like a whole new economic zone was created, like another country, like literally another country with another set of rules that it adheres to, which are very expensive process, and you know, I know you're getting kind of what I'm trying to tell you here. You know, that a monster had been created in this time, and this dynamic of this trade deal, which has basically turned the US dollar into a speculative based currency, where it's the movement of money which drives its value. So everyone becomes mass consumers, and the more you consume, the greater economic warfare you can create. It's like warfare, but done through economic growth that's all built on fiat-based currency and a speculative-based currency. And then China. So okay, go back to eight. Let's go back to 1990. When would it have been signed? So it would have been signed in. It would have been signed in 98. It would have been signed in 98, and then the deal concluded in 97. Of course, Margaret Thatcher had gone there thinking they would want to extend. In 1982, they would want to extend that deal up to, from above Wuhan, and take that whole thing right up to, take that trade block, that economic zone, take it right up to Peking, or what we now call Beijing, and further. And expand this trade zone, that all this area would then be privy to these same economic advantages, as long as they adhere to certain things, certain levels of law that would exist. I mean, I don't know that to be the case, but you look at, like I say, going back to the kind of agreements when we were all talking about the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Nobody was allowed to. You remember, everyone's saying, yes, Europe that wants to do it, and then as soon as Brexit comes and we leave, suddenly all the top leaders are saying, actually, we're the ones who, Boris Johnson openly saying that's what's happening for us. We're going into a free trade deal, and it's just like, but you said it was them that wanted that. And then, but of course, that wasn't shouted out, was it? Because as soon as Boris Johnson started shouting out, we're going to enter into a free trade deal, and as soon as Trump started saying we're all going to go into a free trade deal, everyone had been shouting out, yeah, we want to pay you into a free trade deal, it's them, it's Trans-Pacific Partnership, or they're evil, they're blah, blah, blah. As soon as it went down, zip, all those people that told you that it was Europe that wanted to do that said nothing. Like, literally nothing. Like, it was just like, I had so many people screaming at me, blue in the face, Europe done it, yeah, this, yeah, that. And as soon as you openly hear them saying that, okay, now we've got this, now we're going to go into that, nothing, not a dicky bird. Heartbreaking. You realise how we've all been played, how deep this government, this mind control, govern to rule over, government, mind control, this deep mind control that forces us to make these irrational decisions and back these most ridiculous belief systems, and the blatancy of what's going on in front of us constantly, and yet the masses can't touch it ever. We're just in this kind of like, in this crazy conundrum where they can just keep turning around saying, it's China this, China that, China this, China that, evil China, evil China, evil China. And it's just like, well, China is not really this capitalist zone. It's something else that China entered into. So let's go back again now to look at what happened in 1898, and this agreement between Britain and China at that stage, that we're told was a 99-year lease, which wasn't a 99-year lease, because they didn't have to take Hong Kong back. Hong Kong was British forever. But we were left with the situation that if we took Hong Kong on and we lost control of the shipping routes that were in, most of those were in the new territories, all the power that was feeding the million mouths that was in the parts of Hong Kong that were Hong Kong forever. we're in a situation where there's a massive overpopulation. They'd have no work. China would run everything from the other side, and Britain would just be left with millions of mouths to feed. All these big shiny buildings filled with all these, but actually lost control of the shipping, the fundamental shipping routes, lost control of all the energy supplying, lost control of all the water supply, lost supply of all the kind of fundamental infrastructure that enabled that whole country to run, the whole system to run. And so it was a case of, if we can't do a deal on the new territories, then it's then we've got to let Hong Kong go as well. They've got us by the balls. They gave us something, but they took more from us but they did a peaceful deal, and it was genius, for a better word. It was a genius move by the Chinese. Can I just let the doggy out? She's whining. I think she wants to go out. Go out, sweetheart. I'll have a little wander. So when we're talking about this, when we're talking about the evil Chinese and everything else like that, what we're really talking about, as far as I can see, is one case of election fraud. Blatant election fraud. That has massively affected the dynamics of this planet. And obviously, like I say, Margaret Thatcher went out with the grand intention of doing the same thing. And people can say, oh, she went out there to do that deliberately. But she didn't. And she didn't. And you know that she didn't, because she met with the Chinese foreign minister the day before, and with the grand intention of doing meeting Deng Xiaoping. And she met the foreign minister the day before, and she literally sat down for an informal meeting, and he apparently said to her, we understand there's a great deal of mistakes that need to be corrected. Now, she was sitting down with the foreign minister, probably the most intelligent man in China, if not the most intelligent man in the world. I mean, a very, very clever man by all accounts, and I forget his name. I remember writing about this story years ago, so I did a lot of research on it years ago. But her response to him was a very snotty, well, I'll deal with that tomorrow when I speak to Deng Xiaoping. And of course, Deng Xiaoping was not head of state; he was the head of the People's Communist Party. The highest ranking person that she could have spoken to on a government level was the foreign minister, there and then. And she turned around to him and said, we'll deal with that tomorrow when I speak to Deng Xiaoping. I am not even talking to you. You're not even worth talking to. Is what she said to him, basically. Translation. What he would have heard in that comment, and he just nodded to her and said, basically, indeed we will. We'll deal with this tomorrow when you speak to Deng Xiaoping. And of course she got to the Great Hall in Beijing, or Peking then, and went to meet Deng Xiaoping, and he rolled in as if he was going to walk up and talk to her. He never spoke to her. He just went straight to the microphone. He said, we're taking Hong Kong back, lock, stock and barrel. And then he walked out. And she walked out of the building just absolutely flustered, like, what the hell have I just gone and done? And and now, if she was confident about the decision, and that was her intention, would she have collapsed on all fours going down the stairs of the I can't remember what they call it, the Great Hall or the Grand Hall or something like that in Beijing or Peking, and then she collapses and she goes full kind of right down on her hands and knees. It was clearly that she'd had the wind taken out of her. she hadn't got the deal she wanted by a very, very long shot. You know, she'd literally just come back from the, you know, the Falklands 1982 as well. You know, where she'd, you know, two islands. One island she succeeded. She used an unbelievably massive amount of force to secure the Falklands Islands and save the sheep. And yet she comes to the biggest, deepest harbour in the South China Sea, the greatest asset probably in the British Empire at that time, or one of them. And she sits down with the foreign minister for discussions. And when he says, well, let's talk about it, she says, I don't even want to talk to you. Fuck off. Basically. I'll just talk to Deng Xiaoping. He's just like, a great deal of mistakes that need to be sorted out. Yeah, but it's not happening now, love. That's not happening now, love. Missed it by a mile. Missed it by a mile. Had the opportunity to negotiate. Just utterly on another page, on somewhere else completely, just not based in the reality of the situation that was going on in any way, shape or form. Complete classic pompous Englishness. We won the war. Mentality. You will bow to it. And maybe we will. Maybe this is the way it's going, but this is not what you think it is. This is not the situation that most of the stuff you're hearing about China is a monster that was... You know, I'll tell you something else very interesting is, you know, years ago when I started writing Laughing Gas, it all started because I'd written this play about a recycling yard that was getting being forced to shut down by an incinerator that wanted to come in and build this massive incinerator, and they didn't like all the environmentalists and you know, all the environmental kind of activism that was kind of associated with the recycling yard. That was not a big corporate recycling yard, but it was a very kind of like it was a little kind of, you know, it was a bunch of kind of like it was a small kind of like it was a small operation that and this small operation was very frustrated because they were just scratching the surface. And when this big corporation in the play, when the big corporation wants to shut them down, there's a big split in the and this is the story I wrote. There's a big split in this small recycling yard, this small business, between all the different people. And the guys running it up and setting it knows they're not even scratching the surface and just operating this thing. He feels like you know, all the guys who are running it at the top are just saying, we're not even scratching the side. We're just pandering to the lip service and the green bullshit that people actually think there's some kind of agenda going on, and actually we're not even scratching this is just, we're not helping the situation, we're just making people feel like there's a really green agenda, and we're not even doing anything, we're not scratching the surface of it. It needs to be a major kind of like reform from the government to deal with waste on a really high level, and that's just non-existent. And so the best thing we can do is just let them shut us down and let them have their way and let the people experience the loss of that and see if the feeling and the loss of that wakes up a desire to do something, to do something better than that. You know, to really embrace kind of like recycling and on a different level, on a government level, you know, on a massive level, and really engage in that. And I wrote this play, and then the very thing that I'd written and literally unfolded. This massive recycling yard came in, and Magpie, that was the name of our little tiny recycling yard, was getting shut down and it's being taken over by big corporations that were moving in on it, and probably most of that shit was going to be kind of shipped out to China anyway under all this greenwashing and all the rest of it, because that was literally what was going on. Loads of this stuff was massive funding to kind of like do all this recycling, and most of it was just going into bigwigs' pockets, and they were just dumping all this stuff in big containers and sending it out to China to be kind of landfilled, and they could do whatever recycling they could do on it, but basically most of it was just going out to landfill in China. And when I'd written this play, a friend of mine said, "Oh, Dave, you know, he'd worked with me on the play, and we'd put it on in one of the big nightclubs. I put it on in one of the big nightclubs in Brighton, and we got on the night of the election, and I'd written the whole play for this whole thing. And one of the guys involved with it said, I really want you to look at this play I've been writing, which has Tony Blair as Prospero in Shakespeare's play. You know, a kind of spoof of Shakespeare's play, The Tempest, which is the first play in Shakespeare's the works of Shakespeare." Hold on, let the doggy in. Come on in. And so, anyway, sorry, I'm digressing a little bit, but I ended up, you know, I'm a puppeteer. I used to make puppets and sell puppets, and kind of like I did that for many years, and I wanted to build this Tony Blair puppet to bring life to the whole idea of it, and so I went and did this sculpture course to. I've been trying to make his head for a long time and trying to bring in. He had a nose that kind of twitched like that, and I just couldn't get the face right. And in the end, I went off and did this sculpture course, this kind of like sculpting course, and in London to work out the kind of like some of the kind of techniques of capturing kind of like capturing the kind of like capturing, you know, the features of a face. And how to bring that in, and how to animate that, and still keep and still capture all of the. I've got it somewhere. If I can find an overlay of what I did, but what was very odd was when I made Tony Blair, and I went to a lot of process, take lots of different kind of like of kind of cartoon kind of impressions of Tony Blair, and then real pictures of him, and I started using all these different systems to map out and build a kind of like a front profile and a side profile, which then I made my main block of clay out of, and then once I'd got those exact side and front profiles, then I could start taking away and bringing out his features and working out what were the features that were key that made Tony. And to my absolute amazement, the eyes, when I pushed them up, slightly up, it turned into Richard Nixon, and when I brought them down, Tony Blair. Of all the people, there's like 7-8 billion people living on the planet at the time, and at least 7 or 8 billion people that have lived before all of those that are living now and have subsequently died. That's kind of at least around about 15 billion people that have ever lived on the planet, and of all the people that Tony Blair could flip into, it was Richard Nixon, Tony Blair, Richard Nixon, Tony Blair, Richard Nixon, like that, like a switch. It was just like, and at the time I thought, that's just so mad, that's just so incredible. But then there was another part of me that was saying, well, maybe there's something else in that. Maybe imagine if Richard Nixon and Tony Blair were one and the same beings. It all came out for me. I mean, it seemed impossible, and you know, as I wrote Laughing Gas, and as I started kind of like, and which was all about this kind of understanding that they're going to try and drag us into these free trade deals, and we're going to be utterly carved up by those. We're going to be utterly carved up by those free trade deals. And what happens if we get dragged into them? You know, it's just like, you know, in these kind of ideas in the Bible, it says, there's a whole thing with Pontius Pilate or something like that, or Caesar or something, and Jesus is kind of like asked whether he pays his tax. I don't know, I can't remember exactly what it is, and he says, I pay unto God what is God's, and I pay unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Something along that line. I don't even remember that quote. I'm not too sure of it. I'm definitely not going to look it up. But if that rings any bells, maybe one of you can kind of write the exact phrase that might be in the Bible underneath that. But for me, it's not like it's what belongs to the oceanic gods. You know, you pay what you owe to the oceanic gods, and you pay what belongs to the high gods. You know, they're two different gods. You know, you can be in service to one or the other, but you can't be kind of in service to both. You know, my parents at Channel, you know, John and Whitecloud used to say the same thing, that each human being will have to learn that it can only be true to one master. And all of us are going to have to make this ultimate decision. In my life, I will see all of us. I was told that in my life, I will see all of us have to go through this massive bottleneck and make this massive decision and decide which master that we were individually going to be true to. And that's this massive bottleneck process that we're all in now. And the more you get sucked into it, you know, we're all making decisions in this massive process at the moment. We're all making massive decisions. So we don't know what's going to happen here. You can certainly look at the Chinese party and think that the Chinese party is utterly evil and that sort of stuff, and you know, their ideas that religion is evil or poison and everything else like that. But look at what religion's done and everything else like that, and I'm starting to think they might be right, that religion really is poison. I look at the whole carbon dioxide zero movement and how utter bullshit that is. We see Etna or Stromboli going bang and just chucking up like 80 million tons of carbon dioxide in a single eruption, dwarfing what the European Union might chuck out in however many years. It's just like we also understand that as the longer we get into this, that how essential carbon dioxide is, and yet we are in a crazy. It's not a science; it's a religion. Excuse me one sec. I've got a telephone call. I'm gonna have to take that. Hold on. Yes, and so that's really what this is really all about. Is these free trade deals are what are causing all the damage. This is where all of our sovereignty and these ideas of sovereignty and these ideas of sovereign rights, this is where they're all being. You remember how we blamed it all on Europe wants to do this, it's Europe wants to do this, Europe's the evil one, Europe's the evil one. And as soon as Europe is just divided, it's exactly what I said would happen, that Britain would be used as the Trojan horse to break up the European Union and then feed Europe into a war against Russia, break it up, and the only thing that could save Europe from going under the wheels of a war with Russia would be the technology that would then be fed into Europe. So if they did this, they would be given technology. So that's the technology is the carrot on the edge on the end of the string for us here. This hope that we are going to end up more technologically advanced as a result of signing these free trade deals, but actually all of these things are asking us to make terrible decisions. Terrible decisions where we give up so much more than we had before. You know, most of this technology is kind of like, it seems to be invasive spy technology or lethal technology or gene editing technology or nuclear fission based toxic technology. Doesn't seem to be very good pros in this whole story at all. It's all negatives. It's all a massive process, and is China the baddie in this? You know, as soon as you start going down this corridor, you start saying China is bad in this, and China's doing this. It's all China. This is nothing other than election fraud, US election fraud, as far as I can see, and a massive deception and a massive blame game. And we know that, you know, back in the day, when we were talking about, like I say, Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Trans-Atlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, all maritime agreements. Look at NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. All agreements with oceanic orders, and you know, when I saw this whole Planet X coming in, you know, when I wrote Laughing Gas, it was all about the woes of these free trade deals and seeing this whole thing and seeing how we're being dragged into this terrible thing, and that if we went down this corridor, and I could never understand, you know, why I saw it ending in a tsunami. And of course, that belongs to the Atlanteans. It goes back to the water. And that which belongs to our sovereign land rights as humans on this sovereign land, as indigenous species on this land, as with our divine connection to whatever God existed before this Atlantean kind of reptilian rule. When we give up those sovereign rights for spy phones and nuclear bombs and fission-based weapons and gene editing software, we also, you know, the dividing line. You know, when we talk about the bar, you step up to the bar, you know, his lordship. You know, you might stand in the dock, which is the kind of like the middle ground between the kind of the land of the sea, the land and the sea, or the law of the sea and the land. And this is removal of the bar. Shanti, come on. This is removal of the bar. This is complete and utter surrender. It's heartbreaking surrender. It is anyway, so we don't know what's going to happen at the end of January when we're close to this. We don't know whether we're going to see asteroids. We don't know what we're going to see. We don't know what's coming over the hill now. And we certainly don't know what's going to happen. We've got a much better idea of what's going to happen in kind of February, March than we do in late January. You know, it's too early to tell for any of these, but the fact that we saw the long duration volcanoes last year, meaning all these objects were very close to us and running almost parallel, if not parallel, to Earth as it rotates around the sun. They were coming in and they're going off and running parallel. And then this year, all those long duration volcanoes have stopped, meaning that it's now they're coming in from the north and going south, coming from the northern hemisphere. And this one that's just passed, you know, the one I showed, the screenshot I showed in my last video, or my penultimate video of the shot that World of Science put up around about the 24th of November this year, of this epic eclipsing of the sun by this object. That's on, yeah, it's on the thumbnail of my penultimate video, I think. You know, we've just seen too many sightings, and you can see by the cognitive distance that's gone on with the old that humanity's got to go through this what I kind of define as a bottleneck, a massive bottleneck, where we go from our duality into a singularity, and we become one or the other. We can no longer be both at the end of this. We'll either become our highest aspect or our ego aspect, however our ego aspect is, you know, and we become one or the other. You know, we either become ruled by the Atlanteans or we become ruled by our higher gods, and and we live out this. We've been living out this massive conflict individually in our human states. This stopped being a direct, aggressive war a long time ago, and has been the entire war between these two gods has been lived out mostly in a dynamic within all of us on an individual level, as well as the conflicts that we might have with other people, our own self-doubt, our own self-hate, our own self-sabotaging that we've all had to deal with. Some of us can really move through that better than others. And but it's an element that humanity has been dealing with, and it's, like I say, this is that point now where they do everything they can to lower the vibration, because we are right next to all of the aspects of this celestial object, which basically are the, as far as I can see, are the mechanics, the orbital mechanics of what we have come to call God. This is the force or the power that is behind our celestial creation. You know, and in our limited understanding of the situation individually, you know, we are all still created by what I'm of a mind is super, unbelievably high, fantastical intelligence. And ultimately, if we are created by that, ultimately that is our ultimate and final resolve, because we are nothing less than that. And they want us to break away. They want us to break away from that fantastical resolve that we have available to us if we can connect to our highest aspect at these times. And so, you know, just a reminder, just to be very careful about what stories you get dragged into here and what blame games you are going to run here. And, you know, how easy it is to see China as evil in this process. But they are no less up against the Atlantean reptilian orders than we are. This is nothing more and nothing less than the invasion of humanity by this thing that calls itself God. And has called itself God for a long time. And we're all deciding what side of the fence, who is going to be our master. And these are complicated stories. And they're not clear cut. And, you know, when you start realizing that there is a form of radiation that is occurring at the moment on this planet, and it's like the radiation that leaks out of nuclear power stations, but it's a different type of radiation. It's the radiation of, it's the toxic radiation of karma. And we attach to certain stories that are very, very toxic for us. And many of these stories come to us from these stories that we could be perceived as love and light. Many of these stories are kind of broken down stories that were once given in the form of love and life and have been tainted and adapted to push other agendas. And and to push other agendas, and we have to discern now, because many of these stories are going to turn very beautiful people into twisted, horrible people, because of the nature of the karma that's associated with the story, and the damage the story does to this world is so terrible that it repels our very souls away, because they do not want to be dragged into that. They've done that, and so they back away. They're soul repulsing stories, literally. They're ghost stories. Carbon zero is a ghost story. It's how you ghost a planet. Carbon dioxide is the most essential gas on this planet, which is why there's so little of it, why there's such a low percentage of it. It's like 0.04%, even with all the volcanoes going absolutely crazy like they are. You know, our environment, the oceans, you know, because of the moon, the oceans suck up 1/3 of all our carbon dioxide alone, let alone all the other processes that suck up carbon dioxide. It's such an essential gas. Life could not exist on this planet without it. We're all carbon based. To even focus on carbon zero, only ghosts are carbon zero. Only ghosts are carbon zero. And to not even want to even give abundant clean energy lip service, because it interferes with a bullshit profit-making story of carbon zero, is it's a curse. It's literally a curse. It's a demonic curse, which I'm of a mind is the curse that destroyed Mars. That's how Mars was ghosted. Carbon zero is a ghost story. And attaching to it can lead to only one place. Anyways, come on, sweetheart, you're all mucky. Doggie's all a bit muddy because she's been out. It's been raining outside, and oh my goodness, living in boats on the footpaths outside. They're all really muddy. So every time she comes in, she's all covered in mud. But she needs walks and talks and plays and all the rest of it. So that's the discussion for today. It's being mindful of the stories you're being dragged into, having negative thoughts about certain countries and certain different ideas of good and bad, and being drawn into stories that lead you into quite easily into an idea of supremacy, where you're judging another country for this and for that, thinking they're this and they're that, when their hands are so tied, and if they don't comply, then they will be absolutely annihilated. And so they have to find this kind of middle path, and China has been constantly having to find this middle path when dealing with the West and its warring Christian ways. And, you know, we break out of Christianity. You know, in Europe, most of us have broken out of Christianity. We like to think we have, but then we get drawn into these other kind of religious belief systems, like these environmental religions, where we believe we want to be carbon zero. And you can see that a lot of people are becoming carbon zero. And the percentage of people that have got a clue of what's going on is just so unbelievably low. It's a very, very scary situation. So scary. And the thought that, you know, apparently Moderna might come to set up in England, move its offices, and have a 10-year program of making 240, 250 million mRNA, whatever they call them, vaccines every year, allegedly. You know, is that are we going to be dependent on these type of vaccines hereafter? Are we going to have? Is there going to be? Are our immune systems going to be compromised because of these vaccines, that we'll have to have these to fight? You know, is that what happens here? No one knows. It's such uncharted times, but you know, we're told we don't need to worry about the Omicron wave that's coming in from China, where, you know, some countries are going to kind of like block air travel and screen, and we're told this is Omicron and we've all had it, but the China have been so locked down they haven't been exposed to it, and so it's just ripping into China now, and millions of people are getting it every day, and blah blah blah, and all the rest of it. It's just, but we don't need to worry. Maybe we don't. And then also talking about how many subvariants of Omicron there are out there, and they're all subvariants, but they don't really know, but they think they know, and there's utter confusion. And we've all been so lied to. And my father used to say to me, he used to say, son, you can trust a thief, but you can never trust a liar. And we've been lied to so much that we don't know where to pitch an idea. We can't listen to anything now from anyone without doubting it. We're just, every agency is lying. It's like we reach kind of a brick wall in terms of where we're going, on terms of kind of military kind of wise, in terms of kind of aggressions with Russia. We're kind of like we seem to be seconds away from the threat of nuclear war. We seem to be seconds away from the threat of an ecological apocalypse. We seem to be on the edge of a financial, monetary apocalypse. We seem to be technologically in a very, very dangerous place. Nuclear power stations being blown open. We're talking about a massive deal that's just been done with Poland, where they're going to build the biggest nuclear power station in Europe. For whatever, this is the carrot on the end of the string for Poland. Whilst they've got all these, the Ukrainians are pouring in from war-torn Ukraine into kind of Poland right now. So they're dealing with this, which is putting enormous economic pressure on them. But the string, the carrot on the end of the string, is is offering them the biggest nuclear power station in all of Europe. Whilst currently the biggest nuclear power station in Europe, if you can call Ukraine Europe, which apparently you can, is in obviously the Ukraine, and the Russians are on one side and the Ukrainians are on the other, and now all the power's been cut off to it. Now it's relying on the diesel generators to cool it, whilst everyone just blows off little parts of it. And the carrot on the end of the string for those countries to fight against Russia is another nuclear power station. Another one that's even bigger than that one. That's the incentive. It's like every which way you look, doesn't matter which way you slice it. Utter insanity. And now we got, this kind of like, this gene kind of like crisis where we can't define what we are in terms of man, woman anymore, and everything's just up for grabs in terms of a definition of who we are as human beings, as a species. We are in now the most perilous time. We are in all the crazy things that I said would come to us if we left Europe have now arrived. And I don't know what happens here. It doesn't feel like a happy new year. It doesn't feel like I'm going to go out with my mates and celebrate. Yahoo! Great! World War III! Kind of like nuclear power stations, everything going fucking crazy. The whole COVID, la la la, everything, vaccines, the whole shaboodle. Does it feel like time to go and celebrate? Being English? Being Western? Being white? Being male? Being human? What are we going to celebrate? Being alive? I will say that I've been having this terrible skin condition. It's been going on for a few years, and it's been getting a lot worse just lately, and it's really floored me over the last few months. and it got really out of hand. And I went to try and do a job in London. I was fitting this engine in this boat in London, and it got absolutely out of control. And it got onto my foot, and it really started swelling up. And I started really thinking, "Oh my God, this is it. I'm going to go." And then it got so bad, my foot bloated out, and got really swollen, and at the last minute I discovered Nemor, but I think I've been using the Nemor without that active ingredient. I can't remember the name of the word, but it's like Azak, whatever it's called. But when you've got two types of Nemor, one that's been processed and had the long chemical name, which is the pesticide. It's actually a pesticide. It's the equivalent of, it's a topical pesticide. It's the topical equivalent to ivermectin. And I use that I use the kind of like the unprocessed with the pesticide that's still in it, and it's had a massive result. But still not, it's made all the skin peel on my hands and my feet, and they just turned into like this glass. So for the best part of kind of like 6 weeks, I've barely been able to walk, barely been able to use my hands, the whole process. But my foot has now got, the swelling's gone down in my foot. Everything's starting to come back online a little bit, but it's absolutely killed me. So it still goes on, and I'm only putting that out there because I could so do with some help at the moment financially. If anyone wants to help me or anything else like that financially at the moment, honestly, it would be massively appreciated. So I'm just putting that out there as a little kind of like, if you want to help, if anything I've been putting out there has been assistance for you, know that there are ways you could help me as well. If you want a copy of the book, Laughing Gas, you want me to send you a PDF, I'll send that through to you. Just remember that I've never made a penny on that book. I've got so many people who have bought that book and they buy it secondhand off Amazon. I've never received a single sale on Amazon. So where all these secondhand copies come from that Amazon sell? It's outrageous. It's outrageous. But they stop all the views to my channel, so we don't make any advertising on there. So it's just it's a massive restriction. The biggest donor I ever had was I always call him JDoc74 because that's his name on I won't say his personal name because he might not want that, but his name on Reddit is JDoc74. That's his handle, and he gave me a big donation several years back, and that was absolutely amazing. And honestly, that's kept me going. And through this whole process, I've got to say, I feel like probably the last couple of years has been the most ineffective couple of years for me on making videos. I know I got the model together for 2020, and there was a massive amount of work, and it's not like that I haven't been working since then. I've made so many different attempts to build this new model, only to be proved wrong, and another change, and another change, and another change, and so there is another model coming. And like with all the other ones, it's going to be massively dependent on what happens in this January flyby, and what happens in this kind of like these two flybys back to back will be a massive, massive telling of these final little details that would enable me to finally give you this model here, with the motion, with everything going in the right ways, with all the flybys, literally all the flybys going back, that we can accurately predict. It would be like it would be similar to this, except that we'd have all the flybys going back. We could make this part of the model going all the way back to certainly to there, but I'm of a mind that we could go right back and pretty much show, with all the seismology that we've got, we could do quite a detailed flyby of the last 400 years, because this is when it really started. This is 400 years ago when it first came into view, as in Jupiter or whatever you want to call it came into view. Hadn't been in view since the time of Jesus, basically. Well, I mean, it takes 400 years to come in, and it takes 400 years to go out by the looks of it. As in, that's 400 years ago, and then we get closer and closer to the Pluto system, and then we start moving away from it. And obviously, we'd have to go back to the beginning to kind of like see what that would be like as we go for the 400 years after, until it starts dropping out of sight, until we can barely see Pluto or Uranus or Neptune or whatever you want to call it, and then we're so far away from it, and then we get to, like I say, Galileo's time, and we come back to that again. It starts coming into view, and so that's the big cycle that we're seeing. And we're, as far as I can see, at the point of the biggest crossing of the ecliptic and the closest point to these planets. We're right in the middle of it now. We're like 1 year past the very central point, and so we're also on the other side of the whole ecliptic plane of the system we really orbit for the first time in probably around about 84 years, and we don't really know what that means energetically. In terms of being, if one side's positive and one side's negative, we don't really know what the effect of what it's going to be for our planet and our whole solar system to be on the flip side of the side that we've just been in for the last 84 years. We're on the other side. Do other energy systems work better when we're on this side? Could it be the ether, or whatever you want to call the energy that was used that was used in the pyramids and things like this? We just don't know. We're a completely new epoch. We're in a completely new place in the system that everything's different. And for us, most of us, we're in an apocalyptic story where it's looking like the end of everything, and ends are also beginnings. And so we're at the beginning of something as well, and we've got to keep remembering that there's many stories that are being given right now that don't really make sense and just take us into a place of blame, and we've got to be so careful with those now, because they're like heavy weights, and they're like crocodiles dragging you to the bottom of the lake to have their way with you, to draw you into a story which is a religious belief, not based on science, not based on research, not based on patterns and sightings, but based on fundamentalism, blind belief, religious belief, where you don't need any proof. You just need your righteous superiority to empower it. You're good and they're bad. You're right and they're wrong. And as soon as you're finding another country that's wrong that might not be wrong, then you become wrong. And you go down a corridor, and your soul might not want to be going down that corridor with you. It might cut you loose. It's like having a friend who becomes a nutter, and going out with them is going to be trouble. And sometimes that trouble is just more hassle than it's worth, and you have to draw a line. You just have to draw a line and say, listen, I can't do that anymore. Can't go down that road. Done that. Don't like where it goes. Can't handle it. Throw in the towel. Careful where you're going with all these different stories, and me too. Might say the same to me as well. But it's a precarious time, and it's a really difficult time. How are we going to get through it? I do not know. I'm sure we will. But good luck through this heart. Honey in the heart. If you want a copy of Laughing Gas, send me, and I'll send you the PDF. If you want to make a donation, the PayPal link's on the top of my channel. You'll see there's a little there's a link to my PayPal. it would be really appreciated at the moment. Like I say, I'm really struggling. It's been really, really tough. It would be so appreciated right now. And lastly, I just want to say, if you are an animator and if you would like to get involved and you think you could help me push this forward now and take this to another level, and you could see ways in which you could help me in various different ways to make that happen, because I've got the information. We've got so much information, we can piece this together now. We are the first few people that could have pieced this together for probably 1,000 years with the information that we have now to rebuild this whole system as you see it here, which is that whole system really, just in this idea of all moving forward. I try to show that motion, giving you the idea that's moving forward, that's moving forward. You know, Pluto's system is moving forward. They're all moving forward, going round the Milky Way, but they are locked in an orbital relationship. Even though they're all independently orbiting the Milky Way, they are nonetheless in an orbital relationship within that. But their primary is still the Milky Way. You know, this is not the primary of this. The primary of this is what is orbiting, and the primary of this is what this is orbiting as well. This is not its primary. They all share the same primary. They all share the same orbital center in their orbital relationships that they have within this story, but they're all orbiting the same primary. They're all connected to the galactic center of this system, and so are you. And that's what this model gives you. That's what we need to be connecting to. We need to be connecting to our true place in this system right now, so we can power up our realities on this plane and make them powerful. And when we connect to that great power, we might be very surprised by the outcome. So if you want to get involved in that, and you feel like that could, and there could be, and you could not just about money, it's not just about the ideas of kind of getting animators to bring this together. It's about the idea of bringing this into a whole film with all of this information, and what that would be for an individual to experience, seeing that and all the motions of that and reconnecting to that as a picture. What would that do for you? What would that do for our communities? What would that do for our world to be connect to our true place within this system? And the immense power that's wrapped up within this system, which is taken from you when you see it as a static system. Remember, all your major players from Uranus, from Jupiter, from Neptune, from Pluto, all have different perihelion points. They're different closest point to the sun, and that's the front edge. That's their perceived front edge. And so if they're all being given different places, it means they're all suggesting that the sun is moving in a different direction, which means that whenever you see the standard model, you see the sun in the middle and these planets going right round evenly, concentrically around the sun, not breaking the fundamental rules of Kepler's first rule about how an object has a kind of like a frontal point. It's like a comet has a body and a tail. This idea that the object sits at the front and the bits moving, trailing behind. It's a kind of similar thing with orbital mechanics. There's always a front edge. And when things come around the front edge and they take longer to go around the back edge, and they speed up and they come around the front edge, if every one of your players is being given a different front edge to the sun, it means the sun isn't moving. No one can offer you a picture of the solar system moving, because everyone is pulling on it. All your major players are all pulling on it, saying, you're going that way, you're going that way, you're going that way, you're going that way. And you're like, which way's the sun moving? And you're like, I haven't got a clue. I think it might be, but you haven't got a clue. No one's got a clue. Because it's not given. Because it's been deducted as an idea. Intentionally. To stop you connecting to the power of that. So careful what stories you're going into right now. Try and curb some of this noise in your head and try and do some meditations and stuff like that to try and bring yourself out of it. Try to use my model and other systems like that to try and make an attempt to feel what it's like to stand on your planet where you are in the world right now, and try and feel, with all the information I've given you, try to start building yourself a picture and a zodiac of where all these planets are coming and going, where the planets were at the time when you were born. I was born on the 7th of November 1968, when the day the crime happened, the biggest crime in history, the biggest, election fraud. It didn't happen on the 5th. The votes came in on the 5th of November. That's when the day of voting was, on the 5th of November 1968. That's when Dick Gregory won. But on the 7th of November was when all the article, when New York Times ran the story to say that, the computer systems couldn't be trusted, and no way would the American people vote for a black comedian over a white supremacist. They didn't say that, but it's true. Allegedly. November, there was massive floods, ironically, in I think it was August, but it could have been October. Ironically, the flood defences that were built where I've got my boat at the moment in Bath, they've where I'm doing it up, they were just like that flood defence that was built there was as a result of the flooding that happened in I think it was October 1968. It was 1968. And massive flooding, and October was a key point, and I can see where the planets were. My mum was born in ironically September 1944. That was the back end of another flyby. It was coming in kind of like she was born on a major she was born in 1944 when Vesuvius went bang. My dad was born in around about the same time. They all came in on the Planet X system when it was kind of like on the level, and now you come back to that same point again. So there's going to be many arrivals are going to come at this point, but many people are going to be departing at this point as well, because we're right next to the place where many of these souls had come from in the first place. This is when many of the doors are open to this higher realm, what I call the fifth dimension. This kind of like this higher earth that is a kind of a build-up of all of our best. It's not an individual astral realms like Earth astral realms that are your own individual astral realms, and so you fight over it, and everyone wants to be really important and kind of seize the day, if you like. Everyone wants to seize the day. Everyone wants to be powerful and take over the environment, and so if anyone create something, the dynamics we have at the moment is everyone wants to control. If you build something, it's just like, oh, I'm really important in this. And what you're doing is you're seizing and saying, this is my realm. And this is all going on. And so people want to seize that kind of energetically. So it becomes their realm. So they can invite into because you can share your astral realms, your earth astral realms, with those that you invite into those realms. Or those you dominate into those realms. And they enter those realms under condition of domination, or they enter into those realms under condition of kind of like through sexual acts or through kind of like whatever doorways allow those people, but they're not consensual realms. They're your individual realms, and so we can start something. You'll see some people come in and they just energetically take over because they're saying, "I want this astral realm." It's not just about what you're creating here, it's what you're creating through the projection of your existence here and building on a higher level. This is like, say, where we build our castles in the sky, but whilst we build our castles in our astral realms from this earth experience, where we go to when we sleep and when we leave this planet, we've also been building a much higher realm, which is a completely communal realm. It's not your realm, it's not my realm, it's all of our realms. But you have to be of a high enough vibration to exist in there, else you're just going to try and do what we've been doing in the fourth dimension, which is take over. Mine, me, mine, mine. And these high realms are consensual realms where we all contribute and we've all brought our best that we've had in many lives, and it's all of our best. So that's what I talk about when I talk about the fifth, and that's what many of us are connecting to. And there's many souls that have come into this plane from the fifth to help facilitate all those that are ready to migrate from the fourth to the fifth. And the fourth, like I say, is getting shut down. It always gets shut down at these big times. This is when the whole thing fizzles out and disappears, and the big transference happens, and everything moves up to the next level, to the fifth. And those that don't go with it, they come back to just the third, and then they start building a whole new astral realm. If they don't go up to the fifth, then they have to come back to this realm, and they lose everything, all they've built so far, and they start over, and they go back to nothing. And that's a massive emotional loss. That's why I wrote Laughing Gas. That's what I experienced myself losing. That was why I wrote it. I experienced the pain of that loss, of not being able to make it in the fifth and being sucked down with all the stories that I'd attached to that I thought were true, and the karma that I generated by the attachment of this. When the whole astral realms got shut down by the big flyby that comes in, I couldn't make it to the fifth in this vision that I had, and I got dragged, and it was all lost. Everything I'd built for thousands of years was all gone in a single shot, and I lost it all. I was a fallen angel, and my whole attempt is to try and reverse the toxic karma that I generated by my attachment to all these bullshit environmental stories that I believed were so good, but they were just, it wasn't that I was bad, it was just that I was attaching to religious belief, nonsensical religious belief that had grounding in nothing other than just profit and propaganda and control and deception, a ghost story that made me believe that I was an environmental activist when I was actually just a born-again Christian. And I had to come out of that. So we need a lot of meditation, a lot of clearing right now to try and come out of many of these heavy stories and to reconnect to the most divine aspects. And that's a massive journey. And giving is a real part of that. Giving and generosity. Sharing and helping is a big part of that. However you want to do that. Big story. Big video. Sorry, I do waffle on, don't I? But I think hopefully I've covered the subject I really wanted to say about China, and just to be very, very careful about your thoughts about what you're putting out at the moment, and what you're karmically releasing, and what you're programming, because this is the petrol that they want you to throw on this big fire. And that petrol is human karma and your judgments. And it's toxic karma. It's radiation. It's karmic radiation. Very, very toxic for you. Very, very bad for you. Very bad for your soul. Your soul will not go near it. Egos use it as an agenda to separate you from your soul. It's, you know, in the Northern Lights they have the guillotine that chops off the children's souls. Carbon zero. That is the same guillotine that chops off your soul. Your soul will not join you on that journey. The logic of building nuclear power stations on fault lines and tsunami hotspots to stop the carbon dioxide spewing out of volcanoes, the essential carbon dioxide. Now you look at the big volcano on Mars that goes off periodically, that they say is not a volcano, even though it's a massive mountain with a hole in the top with smoke coming out of it. That is predictable. You see when the flyby goes off, and how many times have I said, look, that one's going to go off, and then smoke comes out of it. At least 2 times. Oh, it's not a volcano. And then what's the predominant gas on Mars? The only gas on Mars. 95, 96% of gas, and you know what that gas is. You get one guess. Oh, it's not coming out of the big volcano. It's not a volcano. It's just a mountain with a hole in the top that spews gas every now and then, but it's not a volcano. I know there's carbon dioxide. You know, we're leaving you with that guess of what it is. Anything they're not is carbon zero. Only thing they're not. Stupid stories that have no power other than to fuck you up. So thank you for your time. Thank you for following me for this long. Honey in the heart. 1,000 thank yous. If you want to support me in any way, please, honestly, now it'd be absolutely amazing. It's yeah, but you know, it is what it is, and you know, you know, we all just do the best we can, and we muddle through in whichever way we can in this. And I probably haven't been the best and most effective player in the last couple of years, but I don't think any of us have. Really, I think we've all been so shell-shocked by what's happening. It's just unbelievable. The people that you thought were going to be the most right on, and that's been the biggest, most painful thing for me. The ones that you thought were the most right on ones are the biggest born agains. Everything's been turned up on its head. Everything's been turned up on its head. Just class systems created for special people. And then they can look at other people and just think that they're not special. Our entire left, right wing politics all just leads you into being either the good lefty or the good righty, not the wrongy. All just ways of leading you into another form of supremacy. And I'm special and you're not. I'm allowed and you're not allowed. I'm good and you're bad. I'm right and you're wrong. Honey in the heart. 1,000 thank you. I can just hear footsteps, so I think my guest is just turned up. So I'm going to love you and leave you and say thank you for your time. And